Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I am the digital editor here at Alta Journal, and I am very excited to welcome you all to today's conversation on the residents of Eastern Oregon who want to secede from the state and become part of Idaho, their neighbors to the east. We're joined today by Mike McCarter, president of the Greater Idaho Movement. Mike was interviewed as part of Julian Smith's fascinating feature in the current issue of Alta, When Democracy Fails. We're going to dive deeper into the article and give Mike, our guest, a chance to rebut some of the concerns raised by opponents of his movement in Julian's article. So I've popped the article in the chat for those of you that haven't had a chance to read it yet. But this issue has been covered by national and international media. It is a growing movement. Before we dive into that conversation, a bit about our guest. Mike McCarter is a retired nursery manager and veteran, having lived outside of Oregon only to serve in Vietnam. Past president of both the Oregon Association of Nurserymen and the Agribusiness Council of Oregon, Mike is currently president of the Greater Idaho Movement and Move Oregon's Border. He lives in Lapine, Oregon with his wife and is the father of 9, grandfather of 27, and great-grandfather to 7, which is beautiful. Congrats on your huge, beautiful family, Mike.
Thanks.
Some brief housekeeping. Alta Live is the digital interview series we do here at Alta Journal. If you are unfamiliar with Alta, we are an award-winning quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. You can join us as a member for as little as $3 a month, support the work we do, including our monthly California book club. In fact, tomorrow night, we're going to welcome Dave Eggers as our guest for a discussion on his new book, The Every. That's free to all. It's at 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, and you're all more than welcome to attend. But if you do enjoy events like these, we offer these free events to expand upon our work in the magazine and on our website. So if you want to support this work, join us as a member, a full member. You'll get 4 beautiful issues, a hat, a book about our favorite bookstores in California and the West. That's for $50 a year. It's a bargain. Join us, support the work we do. This interview will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. If you've got questions for Mike, you can pop them in the chat or in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Mike and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and we will try and get to as many of your questions as we can. We're also going to send you an email with links to this article, more information about the Greater Idaho Movement, anything else that pops up in our conversation today. Again, I'm so grateful to our guests zooming in from all over the country. And in the case of Annalise, Poland, Mike, where are you zooming in from today?
Lapine, Oregon, and the beautiful snowstorm.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and to talk about the Greater Idaho Movement. I kind of want to start with just the lay of the land, literally, as it were. What exactly, can you tell us what the Greater Idaho Movement proposes and where that proposal stands at the state level right now?
Well, when we started in December of 2019, we wanted to find out that this is a group of grassroots rural Oregonians. We wanted to find out if other rural Oregon counties agreed with us that there is a problem with, we felt, a problem with the leadership in Oregon's legislature. And for many, many years, almost 100 years, rural Oregonians in the east side of the state have felt closer in values, economy, traditions with Idaho. So we started the vote to find out, or started trying to get petitions going to get the vote. The Oregon legislature and the statutes is pretty tight on initiative petitions. And so in order to do this, we had to create basically a law in each county that the county commissioners would look into the possibility or promote the possibility of their county becoming a county of Idaho. And to date, 10 counties have voted in favor by an average margin of 60% across the board. And one of the counties, Wheeler County, put it on the ballot, the commissioners put it on the ballot to actually give the question, would you like your county to become a county of Idaho? Wheeler County said 59%, yes, we want to be a county of Idaho. So where we're at right now is we're trying to get the negotiations started between the Oregon legislature and the Idaho legislature. Now, the Idaho House of Representatives already passed a memorial opening up the door for the Oregon legislature to contact them. Let's start talking about it. During the last gubernatorial election in Oregon, all three candidates recognized the problem between urban and rural Oregon. And all of them said if they became governor that they would approach us, visit the counties. And to date, the current governor of Oregon, Governor Kotek, has visited most Eastern Oregon counties in closed meetings with invited guests only, no advance notice, no public comment or anything. But she, she made that promise in her election bid, and she's kept up with it, except it's done very or little good to what's going on. So right now we're stonewalled by the ruling party in the Oregon legislature. They passed a caucus call last year and said, we will not discuss this in the Oregon legislature. So I believe that what they're trying to do is just wait it out, hope that it's going to die off and it's going to go away. I'm afraid to tell them that they're wrong, because we're in it for the long haul, whatever it takes. Let's get some negotiations going. And we believe that moving or adjusting the border is the reasonable solution right now. So let's start talking about it.
What is exactly the problems between rural and urban Oregon? What is that divide? I know that in Julian's article, one of your fellow Greater Oregon Movement leaders, Matt, brought up that you're really a one issue movement. What is that issue, or if there are multiple issues in your opinion, what are those issues?
Well, I'm going to take it back to the founding of our country. Why did we split from England? Unjust laws, unfair taxes, no representation. We essentially in rural Oregon have no representation legal in the legislature. Now, have we elected legislators? Yes. When I talked to a legislator on the other side of the mountains, when I said, you don't listen to our legislatures, and he stopped me and he said, yes, we do. We just outvote you. It is that blatant that the main concern with the Oregon legislature is the northwest pocket of Oregon, where 70-some% of the population base is at. So they're ignoring Eastern Oregon completely.
All right. Now, the headline of Julian's article grabbed me. It's called "When Democracy Fails," and one of my questions is, isn't this just the way democracy works? If the issues on the table are X and Y, and the majority of Oregonians, whether they live in the Portland area or not, voted this way, then that's just the way Oregon's going to go. And while you want Y to happen, that's democracy. That's just the majority wins.
Well, we are a republic nation there, and there is a good side and a bad side for that 50+1 vote. That 50+1 vote, if it is taken to the extreme where there's detrimental things going to or about the people live in part of the state, do we have the right to speak up, to vote, and to ask for a representation, a leadership, a governance that's more attuned to us, to our type of living style, our values, our rural economy, and things? And that's what we're doing. Now, we're not building, and we're not burning down buildings. We're not marching in the streets and blocking traffic or anything. We're doing this according to the state statutes by vote. And by the way, that vote is a historical record. It's not just a poll, it's a record of how the people in rural Oregon feel. And so um, we're coming down to why can't we speak out? We are getting no reply whatsoever from Oregon's government about our complaints. None. They just keep marching right along with their problems over there and trying to solve them in whichever way, whether it's relaxing drug laws or recreational marijuana or sanctuary states. They're dealing with a whole set of problems that don't affect us in a good way.
Do you feel like Oregon is already two separate states? I mean, it seems to me that Eastern Oregon, which votes, I think the numbers were like 75% Republican, versus Western Oregon, which is, and it's very specific counties, very heavily populated, but a few heavily populated counties in Western Oregon vote extremely blue. So the idea, I guess, is that you would divide, can you just tell us in terms of like the plan is those eastern states, and you've got a line drawn up. I've seen several maps. Some include like a portion of California, a portion of Washington, that would kind of, as many articles have said in covering this, divorce Oregon and marry Idaho. Is that essentially the plan?
Well, if you feel like you're a stepchild and you look for a better way to live or a better set of parents, then you might look at it that way. But the borders have been moved
Right.
hundreds of times in this country. And we're not trying to create a new state. We're not trying to come up with our own government. We're just saying that the Idaho government is a more representative government for our set of values than Western Oregon.
The word I'm a San Franciscan, the word values, what do you specifically mean by those values? Other than I know that a real touchstone of this movement was COVID restrictions placed upon, I mean, just in that were affected all of us, but as ranchers, agricultural communities, businesses in Eastern Oregon particularly felt that sting. So I know that was one issue. I know that property taxes or another issue, and having your money used for social programs that you don't necessarily agree with. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in
Mhm.
terms of those values, can you be a little bit more specific?
Well, our values in the very beginning with this movement was not a political movement. That's not where it was at. It's that we're losing the freedom to keep these values of faith, family, freedom. And the most important one that I focus on is self-sufficiency. I and most of us in Eastern Oregon and rural areas do not need the government to take care of us from cradle to grave. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to eliminate the independent health programs. They want everybody to go under the Oregon Health Plan. So they're taking control of that. They've taken control of the school system. Oregon had one of the worst graduation rates of any of the states out there and the most expensive per student cost. So how did they accomplish that? They eliminated the graduation standards for high school students. All of a sudden, 86% of kids are graduating from high school. Does that make them more qualified? They're pushing social engineering through education instead of the basics to help these young people be better qualified to become adults and provide their own way. They're trying to tell businesses, okay, you have a corporate income tax that you have to pay to the state of Oregon. That corporate income tax is on gross dollars. Whether you make a profit or not, you still have to pay it. They're telling businesses, you must give this kind of vacation here. If somebody is, say, they're bullied, they can take work off and you have to pay for it. So it is going right down the line where they're taking control of every major function in the state. They're trying to get control of the water. They're trying to get control of the property taxes, which the property taxes fund the counties in their operation. But now they want that to go to the state, and then the state will give it back to you as they see you need it. And so it's becoming a mandate, rule, regulation type of state. Now, we have to have government. It's chaos without government. I totally agree with that on there. But when they pass laws and regulations to eliminate, say, natural gas, gasoline, diesel, and want you to run your combines and your farm equipment and your ranch equipment on electric, not going to happen. Or some of us have to drive 3 hours to get to major medical, 3 hours each way. And we're going to go battery operated cars to do that. Some of it just doesn't work right for us over here. Whereas it may be a Portland issue that works great, but it doesn't
Right.
work that way in Eastern Oregon.
Does Oregon, I mean, or I'm sorry, does Idaho have, it seems to me, I mean, Idaho's public school system is not fantastic. Idaho is stretched. I mean, Julian, covers this in his article. Idaho's financial burdens are already stretched pretty thin. If what's it, 380,000 people in Eastern Oregon that would buy this plan. And there are many people who say that this plan won't happen. Technically, constitutionally, it is possible. It has happened before. And I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that it would require both state legislatures, Oregon and Idaho, to agree, and then it would go to the United States Congress. And as of this point, Idaho says it will consider it, start talking about it, and Oregon state legislature, as you had mentioned before, said, forget it, we're never even going to discuss this. Am I correct on where we stand?
You're correct. It
Okay.
is not an Article 4 situation out of the Constitution that takes care of this. Any contract between two states is the same as a contract between two companies. It only needs to be ratified, in our case, by Congress. It's not creating any more senators. It's not creating any more congressmen. So it's not changing their makeup back there. And if you have a blue state and a red state both agree, why would you not allow it?
Okay, so a couple of reasons why you might not allow it. I'm curious to hear what you would say to these. One being, it wouldn't Oregon have to say this happens, say Congress approves it, United States Congress approves it, this happens. Idaho needs to buy all of the Oregon-owned assets that are currently in Eastern Idaho. So Idaho's going to have to come up with some cash to make that happen. Does Eastern Oregon bring assets to Idaho? You bring 380,000 people. So theoretically, there's that tax income as well as all of the agriculture money. I mean, the kind of business money that portion of the state. What's in it for Idaho is really my question.
What's in it for Idaho is that you have a very large number of conservative voters that are moving to their state. It also opens up the land issue where you don't end up with the same kind of influx into Idaho by people trying to get rid of um, states or get out of states that they don't agree with. And it is rate causing house rates, tax rates, and everything to go up. All of a sudden, you've got a chunk of land equal to 62% of the state of Oregon that now people can move to. So it opens up all of that. Potentially, if part of Southern Oregon or Southwest Oregon comes into this, which they want to, it would open up a deep water port, and all of a sudden, Idaho has got beachfront and can ship right straight out of their state to the Pacific Rim countries. So it also, like you say, it increases the revenue coming into their state revenue with it. So it opens up mining, opens up forestry, opens up. They have lost tremendous numbers of acres of agricultural land to housing development in and around Boise because people are just moving in. They don't have a land use type system that Oregon has that prohibits that. All of a sudden now they got more agricultural land that they could take and deal with. So it is a boom for both for Eastern Oregon and Idaho. Now, you talk about the money issue. Currently, in Western Oregon, a figure of $690 per wage earner in Western Oregon go to Eastern Oregon to subsidize those counties. That is a huge chunk of money that comes this way. And that's because Oregon funds their counties differently than Idaho does. Now, Idaho, yes, it has an income tax, but they're working to get rid of that income tax, just like Florida, just like Tennessee, just like Texas. They're trying to make it easier on people on the tax burden so that they don't have to spend all their money on taxes and they can take and provide for their families better there. So it's a win-win-win all the way across, whether you talk Western Oregon, Eastern Oregon, or Idaho.
In terms of, I mean, you're still going to have to, if this happens, again, I'm moving into the like, should this happen category. You're still going to have to pay taxes in Idaho. You
Sure.
just feel more comfortable, more represented by the current Idaho leadership, which tends more conservative, is more Republican than Oregon's. And therefore, you're more comfortable having your tax dollars, decisions, and spending those made by those people. Okay, here's a question. I realize that, like, in terms of where you are in Eastern Oregon, your, the agricultural community around there, the values, as you mentioned, that you not happy funding in Portland and around there that align better with Idahoans. If states start changing borders, just in the big picture, I understand what it would mean for you and your community specifically in Eastern Oregon. But when that happens, if states across the country do this, if we all shift into little states and move around so that we are solidly blue and solidly red, and we divide America into states that are either Democrat or Republican, if we are a two-party country right now, essentially. How doesn't that harm the country as a whole, the United States of America as a whole? Because we wouldn't be united. We would be Democratic states or we would be Republican states, and we're peppered all over, mostly on the coasts. But I would worry that it would have a very negative impact just on America as a whole, an already deeply divided America as a whole right now. How would you respond to that?
I would say that in the very beginning, states were established by like people. Like people moved together and created those states' borders. So why can't states' borders were never designed to be in concrete? That's why they put these moving issues into the Constitution. So what is wrong with allowing people like people coming together in their own state? That's the way it was formed in the beginning.
All right, so I'm going to dive into some questions from our very engaged audience. Annalise from Poland, formerly Idaho, asks, the state of Idaho is also dealing with a number of people who have moved to Idaho from California and presumably other states. Conservative in California is not the same as conservative in Idaho. The housing in Boise is some of the most expensive in the nation. Is it, and kind of Donna in a question backs up, things change over time too. Perhaps, what if Idaho becomes more liberal? How?
Answer to that question. Oddly enough, they have found just recently that Idaho is becoming more conservative because conservative people are moving where other conservative people are, not necessarily liberal people moving into conservative areas. So Idaho is becoming more red. Now you can say, well, that pocket around Boise is turning blue or purple. True. That's another urban area that you've got there, just like Portland.
What's purple? A blend?
Yes, it is. It's a 50-50 type
All
setup.
right.
That's what purple.
Okay. T Short asks, where would you get healthcare from if you go on your own? When you retire, how are you going to be able to pay for your retirement without Social Security? Without kind of, I mean, Social Security is federal. But in terms of all of the, I'm sure of the 380,000 people that might be affected by this move, there are many of them that do need social services, that do rely on the state for some degree of social services. They might not get them in Idaho, for example, like reproductive health care. I'm tossing these out there, but is that,
Mhm.
are we assuming that we're going to kind of just these 380,000 people, whether or not they voted for this, if it goes through, they're going to adopt Idaho's policy, which differ from Oregon in a woman's right to choose, reproductive health care, legalization of marijuana, which I know some people use medicinally, but weed is now legal. That would change. How have you received pushback from neighbors, friends? I know that you've got a big kind of consensus going right now with these 12 or so counties in Oregon, but there's got to be some people in Eastern Oregon that disagree with you. How are they feeling?
Let's talk about that healthcare situation.
Okay.
Why do most people in Canada want to come to the United States to have their healthcare taken care of? Because they don't have to wait 3 months, 6 months. They don't have to be denied because they say, well, you don't fit the criteria here and we're not going to take and spend that kind of money. That's the way that Oregon is turning. When Oregon is a Medicare or one health plan, all of a sudden you put your health care under a bureau or a group that says, yes, no, wait this long, so on. I fought cancer 12 years ago, and they jumped on it within 4 hours to take and get the biopsy, to get the port in, to get stuff ready to go for chemo and everything else. What would happen if I had to wait 3 months? Because there's a backlog of people trying to get their health care taken care of. I want a free, independent, competitive healthcare system where I can choose the level of healthcare I want, the level of whole payment that I want, and not be stuck with one whole program. That's all I'm asking with it. Now, is this move? There's no perfect state.
Right.
We agree with that. We're
Yes.
just saying that Eastern Oregon, rural Oregon, really aligns itself better with Idaho than it does with Western Oregon. That's all we're saying. Let's sit down and start talking about it. Why is the Oregon government afraid to talk about it?
Well, so there's my question. Okay, so Mike, say, I mean, I've watched a number of interviews. Mike has appeared on, I mean, he says yes to every interview, and thank you for saying yes to us. But you've been on Vice News, you've been on the Daily Show talking about this. You're willing to take the punches. I'm curious, say this doesn't happen. That hoops that things that would have to change for Oregon to this part of Oregon to become part of Idaho aren't going to happen. Certainly no time soon. What is the wall? What is the barrier prohibiting a conversation between Eastern Oregon, even though I realize they have far few legislators in the capital, but what is the barrier prohibiting a real conversation so that Eastern Oregonians can feel heard and can feel better represented?
Right now, my gut feeling is that Western Oregons, which is a majority of the legislators, because they're trying to take care of their constituents who vote them into office and everything, they don't care because they don't have to care about it. They're busy dealing with the things that get them reelected or the social programs that they want to start in Portland on that, or trying to figure out the money for the homeless or how we're going to deal with the out of control drug use that's going on with it. 9% of Oregon's population is on 62% of the land. That means 91% of the people live in Western Oregon, and a majority of those are in the north, in the Portland area. Our vote doesn't count over here. Our voice doesn't count over here. And so why should they have to do anything? They can continue on the way they want to continue on. There's nobody to stop them.
And the threat to move or the threat to secede hasn't has it prompted a response in anyone that you hadn't been able to communicate with before?
You know, we're starting to pick up legislators understand the problem. They understand what we're talking about. And in a big sportsman show that I was in over on the other side this last weekend, people over there want to be part of us. People on the west side want to get away from what's going on over there. And so now they're starting to speak out. In a poll out of Portland, 58% roughly of the people said, let them go. Let them go if they don't want to be part of Oregon. Why hold us hostage? I mean, we're servants over here. I'm not going to say slaves, okay? Servants, okay? So if there's that kind of feeling in Western Oregon, and maybe that feeling gets bigger, and I believe it's going to get bigger because I've had 3 counties contact me that want to be part of it from Northwest Oregon. And they're not contiguous with it. So how do you figure that one out? But that voice is starting to come out. Why should we have to pick up everything we have and move? I'm 3rd generation Oregonian. I have my grandkids are 6th generation, great grandkids are 6th generation. We've been around this land longer than a lot of those people out of Portland. Move in, move out, keep on going up the coast type thing. So at least allow us to sit down at the table and discuss issues with it and say, okay, you know, you're passing this law about green energy. How is it affecting 62% of the state with it? We need to bring these up to their mind. Now, can they just ignore it? Of course they can. It may come down someday to a statewide referendum. It may come to that, where let everybody vote in the whole state. But I don't think right now that the Oregon legislature is willing to take that risk.
I want to be conscious of our time. I it seems to me like you really, I mean, your first and foremost is that you really feel unheard and unrepresented and want, which is, you know, an interesting statement, a perspective on what's going on in our country right now, which is so divided, often painfully. There is division among families, not just states, in marriages. I want to end on a positive note.
Yes.
We probably differ on our politics a little bit, but or a lot, but I appreciate your willingness to discuss it and share your perspective. And you know, one of my biggest concerns as an American and a citizen is the division, the anger and the division and the lack of civility. So I want to ask you, what can we do? So I'm a left coast, you know, liberal. What can I do to be a better neighbor? What can we do to be better neighbors with the status quo as it is right now to each other? How can I be a better listener and neighbor to you or to my neighbors who have different political values than me or social values than me? What's your advice for that?
You know, in the old days, you used to go into some of the old country stores and the senior citizens would be sitting around the potbelly stove and hashing out the government and so on. And they choose to disagree, yet they still talk about it. Too many times when one side or the other gets down, and I will not put people in a box. In other words, I will not put Californians that move up here in the liberal box or any other box on it. We're human people. We can sit down, we can discuss issues. Do we have to call each other names? Do we have to brand each other? Right. I've been called an old white supremacist man. What have I done to do that on there? And do we have the right to stand up, speak out in a nonviolent way? We will not allow violence in the Greater Idaho Movement, period. Won't even come close to it. But can we treat each other respectfully? Can I sit down with you and just talk about issues? Maybe I don't understand your side of something. Maybe you don't understand my side of something. But golly, we're all Americans. We're not, I get tired when somebody says, well, I'm an African American. I go, why did we ever put somebody else's country in front of that? If you live here, you're an American.
Oh, well,
You
that's a
know, I'm an
conversation for another
American.
day.
Okay. But again, that goes to branding of people. And I really reject that on there. But
So you're just saying listening, sitting down, talking it out
yeah,
respectfully. Okay.
right. Yeah, really. Just like you and I
Yeah.
talking things, What's wrong with that?
Nothing. Nothing. I appreciate your commitment to this and your sincerity to your cause. Because you've served our country bravely, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
Um, and I thank you for participating in Julian's article and for participating in Alta Live. I'm grateful that you've shared your perspective with us from Eastern Oregon today.
Thank you for allowing me to do that. And I'm always open. I'm always open to that.
Thank you,
As long
Mike.
as we can get the thinking Zoom meeting thing working out.
And we
But
got Zoom to work. All
so,
right. With that, folks, I thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your great questions. You will receive an email later this afternoon with links to what we discussed today. Join us next week. We are going to speak with, who are we speaking with next week? I am so excited to welcome Trisha Romano, Alta contributor Trisha Romano. She's going to join us for a conversation about her new book, The Freaks Came Out to Write, The Definitive History of the Village Voice, the radical paper that changed American culture, and talk specifically about a writer and editor that was attending an event in Seattle and went missing in 1999, and just kind of that story. So we'll be talking about that with Trisha Romano. You're all invited to that. Again, Mike McCarter from the Greater Idaho Movement, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, stay safe and take care. See ya.